All right, everyone. Austin here. Just a little emergency meeting about the Mexico Grand Prix that happened. We're going to do a little recap of it, but first, there's been a lot of talk about how it was a snooze fest, how boring it was, how there was no action, and how people think that this is possibly the worst race of the circuit so far. And I just don't agree with that. I'm not seeing that one bit. Personally, sure, it wasn't the most exciting race of the season. It always is exciting when there are more safety cars or a crash happens and all the drivers are okay and all that. But just because there wasn't too many of those things and there was no crash, that really switched up the order of everything. Doesn't mean it's not an exciting race. I mean, to think that a race has to be interesting just because a crash happens or someone spins off and goes into a barrier or spins off and isn't able to get their car going, which then all the cars pack up together, doesn't mean that it's not exciting. I think that the two main draws from this, later in the race, obviously, you have Daniel Ricciardo, who was killing it. For some reason, it's like he woke up from his Red Bull days and decided to race fast again. If he can just flip that switch, then dude should have been flipping that switch a while ago. But the second draw was, the battle between Red Bull and Mercedes. Now, it's not like Verstappen ran away with it. But if you are going to say that he was up in front and not really challenged the whole time, well, welcome to the entire season. I mean, he just had his 14th race win. There's no doubt he's been dominant the entire season long. So what's really new there? But the interesting thing here was strategies. Mercedes obviously started on mediums, then went to hards. That was not the case for the Red Bulls. The Red Bulls went from medium and then to medium again. And really, it was just this race of strategy where each team said this is the best way to do it. And in the end, Red Bull was right, as they normally are, because they're Red Bull and they're dominating, and there's nothing any team can do about that. But, as a fan, not even a fan of Mercedes necessarily or Hamilton, but thinking, is next lap when the Red Bull's medium tires are going to go? Because they were really extending that medium tire stint. So it's thinking, is the next lap those tires going to go? Is it the next lap? I mean, that's exciting to see if the hards were going to prevail or the mediums were going to prevail. And I just think it's a little unfair to think that because there wasn't a crash or because something happened where a safety car didn't bring all the cars back together. I mean, looking at the top, what is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way up until the Ferraris. The Ferraris didn't have the pace. They were non-existent. I'll admit that sucks. But the order would have stayed the same. Perez wasn't catching Hamilton. Hamilton wasn't catching Verstappen. Russell wasn't catching Perez. So even if there was a safety car and those cars bunched up, it would literally just end the same exact way. They would stay in the position. Nothing would have changed. And you just got to see a lot of good, clean racing, which I think was good. Just because the focus of the broadcast for the most part wasn't necessarily on the top drivers, but instead the midfield moves. You saw Stroll really killing it in the beginning. His soft tires really lit up. He was doing a lot of overtakes. Obviously, Ricciardo at the end. Bottas, his whole saga of qualifying high, dropping back, and then seeing where he can finish. So this was more of a midfield race, I would say, compared to most races of the season, which it's the whole focus is on the big three teams, Ferrari, Red Bull, Mercedes. And that just wasn't the case. But that doesn't mean that a good, clean race isn't any fun. So there's my little take on it. I was a big fan of this Mexico Grand Prix. Got to see a lot of good, clean racing. Nothing wrong with that. Now, if you didn't think that it was super exciting, let me know in the comments. I would love to hear about that. If you're still watching this, please consider subscribing. It would mean the world. And now I'll just take a look at how everyone finished and just see the full results from here. So actually, we'll just look at the top 10. Verstappen, 14th win. Insane. Good for him. I saw something where, because him, Vettel, and Schumacher have the most wins, but of course the races in the season have been different. So Max's wins were 70% of the races this season. Schumacher's was 72%, but Vettel's was like 68%. So if you go off the percentage of wins compared to the races that have occurred, which I think is the right way to do it, then Verstappen's right behind Schumacher. If he wins these next 2 races, I think he could maybe pass it. I didn't do the math on that, so don't quote me there. But either way, exciting, great for him. Hamilton, I'm telling you, these past 2 races, he's been up there. Mercedes has figured something out. In Austin, they brought all of their. It's weird saying that because that's my name, but in the city of Austin, Circuit of the Americas, Mercedes brought all of the upgrades they were going to bring for the season during that race, so that was great. And I think that's really been paying off. Perez, home race, he's just seems just like a good guy. Of course, you want him to win, so great for him. Russell, I could care less about. Not the biggest Russell fan, but yeah, he got 4th and the pitted late, got the fastest lap. So I guess you took 1 point away from Perez, I think, who had it before. Congratulations. Didn't really do too much this late in the season, especially. Sainz and Leclerc, I think it's notable that Sainz was faster than Leclerc the entire weekend, which is noticeable. You don't see that happen really at all this entire season. But besides that, Ferrari just did not. They just did not have it. I don't know what was going on, but boo on Ferrari for not showing up this weekend. They released this hypercar, and it seemed like that took more of a front seat than their F1 team racing. So I don't know what's going on, but hopefully that was just a minor hiccup, and they'll be back in contention for the top in Brazil coming up in 2 weeks, I believe. Ricciardo, again, phenomenal drive. Shout out to him, driver of the day. He deserves it. Honestly, this was a nice little send-off for Ricciardo. I think whether we see some great stuff from him in the last few races of the season or not, this is a nice little moment towards the end of his F1, maybe not career, but, this session of his F1 career, whether he comes back or not, this was a great little send-off for him. So shout out to Ricciardo for that. Ocon, solid drive. I don't think there's anything really that noticeable, except that Ricciardo was able to, with a 10-second time penalty, pull away from Ocon so much in the last 10 laps. So I think Ocon was on the hards towards the end, which we know from the Mercedes, the hards really were not getting it done. But either way, decent drive from Ocon. Obviously, it was a shame that Alonso had engine issues and had to retire. That's such a bummer. He's been driving like crazy. I think it's such a shame he's going to Aston Martin. I think in his, he's getting older. He is, I believe, the oldest driver on the grid. So he's probably just in it a little more for money to set up his family for the future and everything. So I'm sure Aston Martin cut him a fat paycheck, but good for him. I don't think he'll be able to be up here in an Aston Martin if the cars stay the same way as they have been this season, but oh well. Maybe he made the right decision, maybe he didn't. Either way, had to retire this Mexico Grand Prix, such a shame. Norris, average drive. Ricciardo beat him. That's something. I wish it was like that all the time, but can't always be. And then Bottas, I believe he started 6th. Believe so? Maybe 5th. Either way, drop back at the beginning and then on the start. And then was just really trying to weave his way through at the end. And wasn't really able to make too much happen, but at least he finished in the points. Good for him. Proud of him. Proud of him. He cares. Big fan of Bottas, though. He's one of my favorite drivers, especially when I was first getting into F1. So, great for him. That's super exciting. I'd be excited to see if he stays in the sport for a while and stays on with Audi. That'd be pretty nuts since Audi has taken over the Sauber/Alfa Romeo F1 team. Anyway, appreciate you watching. Thanks for listening. If you're still here, subscribing would mean the world to me. And can't wait for Brazil. Catch you then. Thanks.